YouTube. We are on for the part 2 of how to heal patellar tendonitis. And in this segment, we're going to talk about training exclusively. So if you haven't seen part 1, you can go back there. That's when I explain the reasons why you might have developed patellar tendonitis, the symptoms that you might experience that are going to point into that direction. Remember, I'm not a doctor, but if the experience I described in the past video correlates with what you experience, there's a strong chance that that's what you're dealing with. And so now the issue that arises is, how do we heal it? Well, I'm going to go on a limb and say that resting for me is not the option. I don't think tendonitis can be healed that way for 2 reasons. The first one, because the reason why you have tendonitis in the first place is because you either have a certain movement pattern that is faulty, that has created inflammation in the tendons through friction, or you overworked the tendon. But regardless of how you got there, the result is still the same. Now you have tendonitis, meaning that the tendon is inflamed. The second reason why in that situation the rest is not going to work is because it is, in my opinion, that once the tendon is inflamed, something that is going to make it feel better is sending blood in the area. Because I found that once you have inflamed a tendon, even if you fix the movement pattern or if you reduce the frequency, that tendon now is much more susceptible to becoming inflamed. And therefore, you will find that even if you wait 2 weeks and you start again, you're going to get that pain back very soon. And it gets worse and worse because the tendon gets more inflamed and it is being worn out, basically. So what do we want to do? What is the most effective way to completely solve that situation? One, we're going to have to make sure that we correct the movement pattern so that we don't aggravate the injury or snap something. 2, we are going to play around with our frequency and the programming to make sure that we don't make the injury worse by basically putting too much tonnage on it. And 3, we are going to build certain muscles that are going to take the strain off of the tendon. So this entire episode is going to hinge on the notion that we are going to heal tendonitis through work, through exercise. We're not going to sit on the couch, take painkillers and wait. I personally am against painkillers. I am against anti-inflammatory medication. I am not your doctor. I am not the authority on the matter. I have always found that these things made it worse for me. Pain is a signal that your body is sending to your brain telling you that you're messing up. Taking a painkiller for tendonitis only means that you keep wearing down the tendon. You just don't feel it. So you're going to snap something or fragilize it for the rest of your life. Same for anti-inflammatory medicine. You're not really healing the problem. You're just artificially forcing your body to stop the inflammation. But your body is starting that inflammation to show you that there's a problem here. So deal with it, take the pain. It's going to be painful, but we can go through it. I had a very severe and acute case of tendonitis to the point where I could barely walk. I couldn't walk upstairs. I couldn't sleep because it was so inflamed, and I healed it 100%, and I'm back to heavy squatting, heavy lifting. So this is how I did it. This is my method in the gym. You are going to take a box, so it can be any box, right? And you're going to basically teach yourself how to squat properly again. This is going to have 2 beneficial effects. One is going to work the muscles that surround the tendons so that they don't atrophy. And 2, you're going to be able to rework your movement pattern thanks to the box without having to go too deep, without having to potentially re-aggravate the injury with too much of a range of motion. I suggest you start with the tallest box you can find. Anything that allows you to break at the knee and sit on it will be good, but it needs to be tall. The reason why is because you're going to start with an empty bar and you're going to relearn the ability to break at the knee. A thing with tendonitis is that it's a very vicious ailment. in the sense that it gets into your brain, and you end up anticipating the pain so much that you create a relationship with the pain that makes it so that it can install itself, and it never goes anywhere, because now every time you break at the knee, you're expecting that pain. And the worst thing that you can do is also to start prioritizing the other knee so that you can deload the knee that hurts, because now that knee is going to get snapped up too. So we want to rest a little bit just so that you can get over the emotional hump of the tendonitis. But after that, we're back in the gym. You wait 1-2 days just to reset your mindset. You're back in the gym. You start with the tall box, and you're going to do a very slow negative. So when you break at the knee, you're going to slowly descend, and once your butt touches the box, you explode up. And you're going to stack weight, and you're going to accumulate volume, meaning that you do it with an empty bar, then with 25s or 10s, whatever jump you want to make. And you do 5 reps, maybe 5 sets of 5, and then you're going to do more and more reps. Once you start reaching 12 to 15 reps per set and 5 to 6 sets, you can move up in weight. The goal is to start putting more weight on the bar when the pain dissipates. And you're going to find that because that break at the knee is where most of the pain is concentrated in, eventually that pain is going to get dull. It's not going to be as acute, and the more you do that box squat, the less it's going to hurt. Once you get to the point where you can really do that exercise for several sets without any massive amount of pain, it means you're on the right path. Now, what you do not want to do is load too much. There is no point in putting way too much weight on the bar. So once you can do that with 135, we're moving on. You're going to start with a lower box, and you're going to restart the process with an empty bar. I'm not telling you to only do that. This is not your only exercise. This is something that you should be doing on top of the rest of the training you're doing. But because you have acute patellar tendinitis, most likely you're not really working your legs anymore because it hurts too much. So this is going to replace your leg days, basically. This is also going to send blood in the area, which is what we're trying to accomplish too, to send oxygen and nutrients around the tendon. Keep in mind that the frequency for this should be what is comfortable for you. That being said, I highly doubt that you'll be able to do that every day. I will explain in part 3 why, but there are certain protocols you need to run with the knee to make sure that it heals. And what we don't want to do is aggravate the tendonitis. Squatting every day is a great way to do that. You want to exercise the muscles around the joint, give the joint some exercise to keep it elastic and to send blood in it, and then give it some rest so you can walk around and do something and then do it again. So I suggest do it every 2 to 3 days. So back to the boxes, you go with a smaller boxes and you repeat the cycle, and once you can do 135 for like 15 reps easy, again you move on. Do not start thinking you're doing box squats. You're not doing box squats, you're doing a recovery exercise for your patellar tendinitis. So the negative is always slow. Who cares if it looks exaggerated? You're doing that for yourself. What you want to do is slowly lower yourself, because most likely what caused the patellar tendinitis is a tendency you have of speeding up the negative and then using the elastic energy of the tendon to rebound up. I will make videos about it, but this is not the right way to squat for muscle gains and for health. So you slowly lower yourself. Why do you want a slow negative? A slow negative is going to allow you to track your knees, control the angle of your tibia, and learn how to lower yourself in the squat by lengthening your hamstrings and including your glutes. A lot of people develop patellar tendinitis because they have a quad dominance. They have too much quads and not enough hamstrings and glutes, which we call the posterior chain. This is going to teach you how to properly use that. This is also why I personally think that using the box squat as an accessory for the row squat is not super smart, because you're not really doing a knee flexion anymore. It's much more of a hip hinge, especially with the way people do it. Like, people put the box, I'm sort of ranting, but people put the box square so that they have to go with a super wide stance and they don't have space between the back of their knees and the box. So they have to sit down a bunch and lower their torso angle, and that's not a squat. Unless you do low bar squats, if you train high bar squats, this is not a good accessory for the squat. But I digress. This is why it's going to be so good for our thing, is because it's going to deload the knees. You're not going to track the knees forward as much because you're going to push your butt back. This is going to be a pivotal moment because it's going to redefine the way you squat. You're relearning certain movement patterns that put less stress on the knee. That being said, if you're putting less stress on the knee, the stress goes somewhere else. Best case scenario is we're going to redistribute the weight to your hamstrings and glutes. Some people take it too far and the weight is now redistributed on their lower back, which can also lead to injury. This is why we do that with low weight. You do not want to start learning the movement pattern of the box squat with high weight, so we stick to 135. Once you get to 135 with the low box, we're moving to no box. That's when you're going to start to go below parallel, and you're going to start with an empty bar again, and that moment is essential because with the box you sort of have to go a little bit wider. Now that the box is not there, play with your stance. This is your time to relearn the squat, because most likely the squat is the reason why you messed up your knee in the first place. I was the same. I took that as a chance to relearn my squat form 100%. So play around. I would say if you have the time, watch the great video by Super Training with Ed Cohen about the squat. He explains the principle of opening up the groin when you squat and opening up an area for your body to fall into. That allows for much more posterior chain use, and it's a great tool to save your knees because now your knees don't track forward as much and your tibias stay much more perpendicular with the floor. A lot of people can squat with their knees going forward and no knee pain. That's great, it's great for them. That being said, as a bodybuilder, I also know that the more your knees track forward, the more quads you use, the more the joint that is used to move the quads and contract them is being taxed, which is the knee. And because I'm trying to help teach you how to save your knee, I'm explaining to you what we don't want to do. So you might have to go a little bit wider, and when you squat, instead of pushing your knees here, you might want to open them like this. I'm not going to make a form video about it. It's a concept that's been explained by powerlifters 1,000 times, but this is what I use to save my knees. So again, we're doing that with no box. You're relearning the squat. Slow negative, you lower yourself in the hole and then you explode back up. If you feel like it's more beneficial for you to not go ass to grass immediately after you start without the box, that's fine. You can play around with the depth. That being said, the goal of that stage and the way to graduate from that stage is to at least be able to squat below parallel. I say that why? Squats above parallel put more shearing force on the knee. You're trying to cure yourself from patellar tendonitis. You do not want to relearn the squat just to end up doing half squats that are going to be stressful for the knees. You need to be able to let the hamstrings stretch and the glutes do their work at the bottom to help propel you up. So you start with the empty bar, you move on to 10 pounds, 25 pounds. Once you get to 135, what do we do then? We're not going to apply the same techniques that we applied for the box. We're going to push it forward. So once you are able to do 15 reps easy with no pain, because again, please keep in mind, you will feel pain. Rehabbing patellar tendonitis is not painless. There will be no stage during what I said where there will be no pain, but the pain will feel dull. It's not going to feel as pricky and as strong, and it's something you have to go through. Because the tendon is inflamed, as I explained, rest is not going to cure that. Anytime you put pressure on that tendon, it's going to re-inflammate. So you have to go through that motion of inflamming just enough so you can work the muscles around and relearn the pattern so that in the future you are going to be able to be pain-free. It's an investment. But you want to control the pain, and that's why we do slow negative so that you don't push too much. If you get to the point during any training session where it's getting too much, stop and go home. It's going to give time for the tendon to recover. So we get to 135. We're going to do widow makers with 135. So we're going to push the volume to the point where you do 25, 30 reps with 135 for 5 or 6 sets. What is the goal of that? You're going to be sending a massive amount of blood into the area, right? So that's going to be very beneficial for the health of the tendon. And also, you are doing nucleus overload for the quads. This is a massive misconception that I hear a lot. People say, oh, you have bad knees, work your posterior chain. That's not bad advice, but it's not enough because the muscles that protect the tendon are the muscles of the quads. You need the quads to be strong so that they can take the stress that they're supposed to handle on a knee flexion and the tendon can be deloaded. So by doing high volume squats on these, I found that I personally managed to gain some size on my quad that was atrophied, and it's going to prepare you and give you a good base for when you're going to build up again. You're going to stay on that phase for as long as possible because this is the phase where you're trying to fight off the pain. The pain is going to be potentially the worst at this moment, but we still want to do widow makers with slow negative and your new form. This is also when you're going to try and be as efficient as possible with your new technique. And that way, when you start ramping up the weight again, you're not going to have to go through that technical mastery phase because you mastered it during widow makers. This is also going to be good for cardiovascular endurance, which you might have lost because you are not able to do lower body lift. So that's going to be a good thing. You don't want your muscular endurance to be limited by the cardiovascular endurance, so you're catching up here. It's a crash course, basically. That phase can last a long time. But what you don't want and what you never want with an injury is to snap something and regress back to zero. So you want to take your time, stay in that phase as long as possible. Because what's going to come after that phase is the rebuilding of the squat. Your knee is still gonna hurt, my friend. And it's gonna hurt for a long time. I had my patellar tendonitis for close to 2 years, and the pain was with me from that 135 widowmaker to maybe 285, 295. Once you can do that 135, it's going to be up to you to decide the jump you want to take. Because maybe you're a very strong squatter. I wasn't, and I still aren't. So you decide the jump. I think personally, I have a flimsy memory of it, but I think I went straight to 185. And I started doing lower rep ranges and no widow makers, of course. Once the knee and the technique felt better, the pain was still there. Now I'm going to give you a hack, a technique, a trick that I personally think saved my knee. Knee sleeves and knee wraps are amazing for the integrity of your knee. That being said, I find that knee wraps, because they are knee sleeves, because they're a sleeve, the pressure they offer is too uniformous. You want wraps, not any type of wraps. You do not want powerlifting wraps. They don't need to be long. They can be that long, that's enough. What you're going to do is you're going to play around with the way you wrap your knee. Because if you manage to find the right angle, you can put pressure on the patellar tendon so that it stops moving so much and it stops rubbing. And for me, that's what helped me cure my patellar tendonitis, because it also is going to allow you to lift more weight, which is going to put more pressure on the quad without pressuring the tendon, which is going to build the muscle. Disclaimer, you can also tear your tendon doing that, because if you tighten it too much and the tendon has no room to move and you do some motion where the tendon has to move, it will rip. You don't want that to happen, so don't tighten it like a maniac. Play around with it. I've also found that if you have bandage, you can bandage around the leg in a way with tissue that is going to also prevent the tendon from moving. I used to do that a ton. And now that I say that, I do think I can quickly show you what I mean. So basically, what you want to do is, just making sure that I'm going to be in the shot, yes. So, you want to take an elastic wrap, can be of any type, right? And you're going to wrap like this on top of all the patellar tendon rubs inside the knee here, all right? And you're going to play around. Try to get several types of wraps. You can have them tighter, etc. and you basically want most of the pressure to be put here. One thing you can also do is you can start the bandage here, go all the way here. All right, the bandage would need to be higher, and basically you're going to create something with an X shape here to keep the tendon in place. This type of bandage is much more beneficial if the type of patellar tendinitis you have is down there. If it's here, I personally believe that wrapping around the kneecap is much better. Remember, when you wrap, always from the inside of the knee to the outside, never like this. Why? Because when you do your squat, you're going to push the leg outside because you don't want internal rotation of the hip and of the knee, and that's also going to allow you to open up at the hips. So that's pretty much that. The reason why I say get wraps like these is because the powerlifter wraps tend to be really tough, and you don't need that. You just need some random plastic stuff you can buy online. It's super cheap. So that's pretty much that for the squat. After that is going to come the rebuilding phase, and your goal with the rebuilding phase needs to stay as conservative as possible so that you don't re-aggravate the injury. But you're going to feel that the more you work, the better the injury feels. I personally had that pain stay with me until I got my quads to maybe 23 inches, and then the pain went away. Why? Because the muscles of the legs are now able to take care of the tendon. I don't even know if my tendon is healed, to be honest. I never went and did a scan or anything. All I know is that I don't have any pain, and that's enough for me. That's all I care about. I don't care if my tendon is even snapped or ripped. All I know is that I have no pain and I can squat heavy. So that's the way I did it, and I think that it would be beneficial for you if you also did it. And to wrap this up, because I only talked about knee flexion, because I think that the box squat technique I gave you is the only thing you need in terms of training to rehab a patellar tendonitis. I'm also going to, of course, state the obvious. Don't do any impact sports. Don't play basketball. Don't run on concrete. Try to keep your knee as peaceful as possible outside of training. And as far as hip hinges go, I would advise you don't do heavy hip hinges at the early phases of your rehab, because it might put too much pressure on the knee, regardless of if it's a knee flexion or not. But you're going to, of course, have to start working your hamstrings more and more as time goes by. And healing, usually you're going to find that your pain, the amount of pain you feel in your knee, is going to be almost zero on hip hinges much earlier than it would be on knee flexions. You're still going to have pains when you squat, when you'll be able to do deadlifts with no problem. That is if you do conventional. I have no data on sumo deadlift and on the stress it puts on the knee, so don't ask me that. As far as what you should be doing for hamstring movements, anything that is a hip hinge and that works the hamstrings and glutes is going to be beneficial. Why? Because it's the antagonist muscle. It is going to help you on the negative. It's going to help you moving the weight, and it in general makes you stronger, and usually people who are strong don't get hurt as long as they are cautious. So that is all for training for patellar tendinitis, the rehab you have to go through, and the precautions you have to respect when it comes to that. In part 3, I will give you all of the supplements I took to heal, the hacks and the recovery tricks that got me through it, as well as the mental aspects that surround tendinitis that might be preventing you from healing, that are not as obvious as they might sound when they are openly stated, but that are going to be beneficial for you. So if you have any question, we're going to do a part 4 that is going to be a Q&A on patellar tendinitis. Any question you ask in the comment will be put in that video. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.